Photographer came west for landscapes. The cowboy in her frame became the subject of her heart. Photographer came west for landscapes. The cowboy in her frame became the subject of her heart. The camera strap cut into Clara Webb's shoulder the moment her rental car hit the first dirt road outside of Dalton, Montana. The dashboard said 91 degrees. The air outside said something older than that. Something dry and wide and indifferent to her schedule, her deadlines, her editor back in New York who told her she had 3 weeks to deliver 20 publication-ready landscape shots or the magazine feature died on the floor. She had 3 weeks. She had 6 memory cards. She had 0 margin for detours. The road ahead bent around a ridge of burnt orange rock and disappeared. She followed it because she had no other choice, because the GPS had given up 2 miles back with a kind of digital shrug, and because the light was doing something to the hills that made her press her foot harder on the gas instead of softer. That particular gold. That particular slant. The kind of light photographers chased across continents and lost marriages over. She pulled over where the road widened onto a flat shelf of earth overlooking a valley so big it looked painted. She got out. The heat hit her like something personal. She raised the camera. Through the lens, the valley was perfect. Rolling grass the color of dry wheat, a ribbon of creek catching the late light, the far mountains blue and cool and impossibly far. She adjusted the focal length. She breathed. She pressed the shutter once, twice, settling into the rhythm that was the only thing in her life that had never let her down. Then something moved in the lower left corner of the frame. A horse. Black, enormous, moving at a slow trot across the valley floor. And on the horse, a man. Clara didn't lower the camera. She tracked the movement instead, adjusting, the way she adjusted for birds in flight or storms rolling in from the coast. The man sat the horse the way some people sit in their own living rooms, completely at ease. Like the animal beneath him and the ground beneath the animal were all one continuous thing, and he was simply part of it. She took the shot, then another, and another. She wasn't thinking about the landscape anymore. He was maybe half a mile out when he stopped. The horse turned, and for a moment the man seemed to look directly toward the ridge where Clara stood with her camera. She couldn't see his face from that distance. She could only see the stillness of him, the way he sat without moving, one hand resting loose on the saddle horn, the other hanging at his side. Clara lowered the camera. Her mouth was dry. She told herself it was the heat. She got back in the car and drove. The town of Dalton was 4 streets wide and proud of it. A hardware store, a diner, a gas station with a single pump, and a motel called the Prairie Rest that had seen better decades. Clara checked in, carried her gear to room 7, and sat on the edge of the bed staring at the photograph on the back of her camera's preview screen. The man on the horse. She hadn't meant to keep shooting him. She'd been hired for landscapes, not portraits, not cowboys. Not whatever this was. But the image on the screen was the best thing she'd taken in 2 years, and she knew it the way she always knew, down in the place where certainty lives before the brain catches up. The light, the posture, the horse, the valley behind him. It was a cover shot. It was the kind of image that stopped people mid-page. She set the camera down. The diner was called Rosie's, which was either the owner's name or a hope someone had in the 1960s. Clara ordered coffee and eggs and sat at the counter, which was the correct place to sit in a small-town diner if you wanted to learn anything. The woman behind the counter was in her 50s, gray-haired with the particular efficiency of someone who'd been doing the same job for 25 years and had made peace with every corner of it. "You passing through?" the woman asked. 3 weeks, Clara said. "Shooting landscapes for a magazine feature," the woman nodded. "Which direction did you come from?" "Came off the Ridge Road, the one that runs above the valley." The woman's expression shifted, not dramatically, just enough. "Colton's Land," she said, and went back to filling salt shakers. Clara turned the name over. "Is that a person or a place?" "Both," the woman said. "Around here they're usually the same thing." Clara drank her coffee. Outside, the last light was dying over the rooftops, turning the single main street into something that looked like a movie set, too perfect, too quiet, too much of exactly what a city person imagined the West to look like. She'd spent her whole career photographing places like this from the outside. She'd never once stayed long enough to understand them from the inside. She looked at the photograph again on her phone. The man on the horse. Colton's Land. She put the phone away and ate her eggs. She was here for landscapes. She told herself this firmly. She told herself this the way you tell yourself something you already know isn't going to hold. In the morning, she drove back to the ridge. The valley below was different in the early light, cooler, the grass holding the night's damp, the creek flashing silver instead of gold. Clara set up her tripod and worked for 2 hours, moving along the ridge, adjusting angles, chasing the light as it climbed. She filled 43 frames with exactly the kind of images her editor wanted. Wide, dramatic, empty. She was packing up when she heard the horse. Not saw, heard. The slow, even rhythm of hooves on dry earth coming up from below on a trail she hadn't noticed. She straightened. The horse came over the rim of the ridge first, that same black animal, and then the man behind it, and then the whole long, quiet space between them closed to 20 feet before either of them spoke. He was younger than she'd expected. Mid-30s, maybe. Brown hair under a hat that had been worn long enough to stop being an accessory and start being a face. He had the kind of eyes that registered things without announcing that they were registering them. Clara had photographed heads of state, war correspondents, one sitting president. She could read a face the way other people read weather. This face was doing something she couldn't immediately name. "You were up here yesterday," he said, not an accusation. A statement of a fact he'd already decided to be neutral about. "Yes," she said. "You photographed the valley?" "Yes," he looked at her camera bag. "Magazine work? A feature, landscapes of the American West." She paused. "I'm Clara Webb." He touched the brim of his hat. Not a performance, just a habit so old it had become reflex. "Colton Hale." The valley spread out below them in the morning light. Neither of them looked at it. Clara drove back to the motel with her 43 landscape shots and one name rattling around her head. She uploaded the day's work onto her laptop, went through the frames, flagged the best ones, sent 4 to her editor with a short note saying the light out here was doing things she hadn't expected. Her editor wrote back in 12 minutes flat. "Good. Keep going. Don't rush." Clara looked at the photographs from the day before, the ones of Colton Hale crossing the valley on his black horse. She'd loaded those separately, kept them in a different folder, told herself she was being professional. Portrait work and landscape work stayed separate. That was just organization. She opened the folder anyway. She had 11 shots. Most of them were too distant, the figure small against the enormous expanse of land, useful only as a sense of scale. But 3 of them were different. In those 3, the light had caught him at the exact moment the horse shifted direction. The man's body following the animal's movement with that complete ease. And the result was something Clara had spent her whole career trying to capture in other ways. Not a person in a landscape, a person who was the landscape. Someone so embedded in a place that pulling them out of it would leave a visible hole. She closed the laptop. She went to Rosie's for dinner and sat at the counter again. The gray-haired woman, whose name turned out to be Dot, poured coffee without being asked, which Clara took as a sign of acceptance. "Tell me about Colton Hale," Clara said. Dot set down the coffee pot with the particular deliberateness of someone deciding how much to say. "3rd generation on that land," she said finally. "His grandfather built the original house. His father ran it until he passed 8 years ago now. Colton's been running it alone since." "Alone," Clara repeated. "His wife left 4 years back," Dot said, and there was no judgment in it, only the flat delivery of a known fact. "Took their daughter, lives over in Billings now. Colton sees the girl on weekends when he can get away, which isn't often enough, and he knows it." Clara wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "He's a private man," Dot added. "Not unfriendly, just private. There's a difference." "There is," Clara agreed. She ate her dinner and walked back to the motel under a sky so full of stars it looked like it was trying too hard, like nature had overcommitted to the aesthetic, and she stood in the parking lot for a long moment looking up before going inside. She pulled out her laptop again. She opened the folder, the 11 photographs of Colton Hale. She'd built her career on restraint, on knowing when to stop shooting and when to push, on understanding the difference between an interesting image and a true one. The 3 good shots in the folder were interesting. But they were not yet true. To be true, she would need to be closer. She would need permission. She would need to go back up to that ridge and ask Colton Hale a question she wasn't entirely sure she had the right to ask. She closed the laptop and went asleep. She dreamed about the valley. In the morning, she drove back. He was already there, not on the horse this time. On foot, standing at the edge of the ridge, looking out at the land below with the focused stillness of a man doing mental math. A fence lying down in the west field, she'd learn later. He'd been calculating repair costs, the kind of calculation that happened in the body as much as the head, because when you owned land, you owned its problems at a cellular level. Clara parked. She walked to where he stood. She stopped beside him, 6 feet of space between them, and looked at the valley the same way he was looking at it. "I want to ask you something," she said. He didn't turn. "All right. I photographed you yesterday from a distance." "I didn't ask first, and I should have." She paused. "I'd like to shoot more with your permission, portrait work, not the landscapes, you and this land." Now he turned, those registering eyes doing their thing. "Why?" "Because the 3 best shots I took yesterday weren't of the valley." She said it straight. "They were of you in it." He was quiet for a moment. Below them, the creek caught the morning light and threw it back. "My face ends up in a magazine," he said. "My daughter's going to see it." Clara nodded. "That's true." "She's 9, he said. "She'd think it was funny." Something in his voice on the word funny was the sound of a man who had rationed his reasons to smile and was carefully spending one now. Clara raised the camera. "Is that a yes?" she asked. He turned back to the valley. "Don't make me look foolish," he said. She pressed the shutter. It was the best shot of the trip. She knew it before she lowered the camera. His profile, the valley, the morning light, and the particular way a person looks when they are trying not to smile and losing. She had 2.5 weeks left. She was already terrified of the last day. For the first 3 days of working with Colton Hale, Clara kept things strictly professional. She arrived at the ranch in the morning, she shot what she needed, she left before dinner. She talked when she needed to talk for positioning or light, and she listened when he said something about the land, which he did occasionally, briefly, in the way of a person who had spent so many years thinking things without saying them that the words came out already. Compressed. She learned that the black horse was named Ford, which was not a romantic name, but was an honest one. She learned that the south pasture flooded every spring and had done so for 30 years, and that Colton had stopped fighting it and started planning around it, because some things are not problems but facts. She learned that he woke at 4:30 every morning, not because he had to, but because the ranch made a particular sound in the hour before dawn that he'd stopped being able to sleep through sometime in his 20s. She did not learn why his wife had left. She did not ask. On the 4th day, she arrived to find him fixing a section of fence on the east boundary, the post driver working in short, powerful strokes, the sound carrying flat across the morning air. She raised the camera and shot the work, the physical geometry of it. The way a man looks when he is doing something real with his hands, when the labor is not performance but necessity. She shot him from 40 feet, then 20, then close enough that she could hear him breathing over the sound of the driver. He didn't stop working. He didn't perform for the camera. That was the thing about him that she'd understood by the 2nd day and hadn't stopped thinking about since. Most people, when photographed, made an adjustment. Imperceptible, maybe, but present. A slight change in how they held themselves, a micro-awareness of being seen. Colton Hale did not do this. He moved through her lens the same way he moved through his own land, as if the camera were simply part of the weather. Clara had shot 43 countries. She had never photographed anyone like this. She lowered the camera. "Water," he said, and walked to a cooler sitting in the back of a battered green truck. He pulled out 2 bottles, handed her one without asking if she wanted it, and drank his in 4 long swallows. Clara drank hers. "You don't ever stop," he said, not a complaint. "When the light changes," she said, "or when there's nothing worth shooting." He looked at her, that registering look. "Has there been nothing worth shooting today?" "No," she said. He nodded and went back to the fence post. She shot another 90 frames. On the 6th day, it rained. The kind of Montana rain that doesn't ask permission, that rolls in off the mountains with total authority and drenches everything in 20 minutes flat. Clara was out in the east field when it started, and she made it to the barn at a dead run, holding the camera bag against her chest like something vital, which it was. Colton was already inside with Ford, the horse in its stall, water running off the brim of Colton's hat in a steady curtain. He looked at Clara dripping in the barn doorway. "You're wet," he said. "I'm aware," she said. Ford regarded her with the specific skepticism of a horse who had formed an opinion and was sticking with it. Clara sat down on a hay bale and pushed her wet hair out of her face. Outside the barn, the rain turned the fields gray and soft, and the mountains behind them disappeared entirely into low cloud. She raised the camera. "You're shooting in a barn," Colton said. The light in barns during rain is extraordinary, she said. He looked at her like she'd said something in a language he didn't speak but found interesting. What is it like? He said after a moment. Seeing everything through that thing? Clara lowered the camera. It was a question she'd been asked before, usually by people who meant it as a slight. The implication being that a lens was a wall, a way of keeping the world at distance. She'd always given a professional answer. Something about composition, about looking for truth. She looked at Colton Hale standing in the barn doorway with Rain behind him and his horse watching over the stall rail. Depends on what you're shooting, she said. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he looked back at the Rain. She shot the photograph. His profile in the barn doorway, the rain, the gray light, the horse behind him. Three things that together made a fourth thing, the way photographs always worked at their best. The sum being something the parts couldn't explain. That evening back at the motel, she sat with her laptop and went through the day's work. 112 frames. She culled them with her usual discipline, moving fast, flagging only what stopped her. In the end, she had 11 worth keeping. She set the laptop aside and thought about his question. Depends on what you're shooting. She'd meant it as a deflection. But sitting in the quiet of room 7, with the rain still tapping on the roof and 12 days left on her assignment, she knew it had also been true in a way she hadn't entirely intended. She opened the folder she'd labeled simply Hale. 47 photographs now. The full span of the week. She went through them in order, which she rarely did, and what she saw was not a portrait series. It was something else, something that happened over time. In the earliest photographs, he was a figure in a landscape. By the middle of the week, he was a person. By today's barn photographs, he was something she didn't have a clean word for. She closed the folder. She called her editor. The landscapes are great, she said. But there's a portrait series developing that I think is the real story. Portrait of who? A rancher, third generation, the relationship between a man and his land. Her editor was quiet for a moment. Is it good? Clara thought about the barn doorway, the rain, the horse. Yes, she said. Send me 3. She sent the barn photograph, the ridge photograph from the first morning, and one from the east field during the fence work. Her editor called back in 20 minutes. Clara, she said. I know, Clara said. Who is this man? Clara looked at the rain on the window. That, she said, is a very good question. 10 days left. Clara knew it the way you know something when you've started counting backward without deciding to. The portrait work had found its shape. She had a sequence now, not just individual images. The early morning shots, the work shots, the 2 or 3 unguarded moments she'd captured where Colton's expression did something she couldn't manufacture. Her editor had seen the full preview and used the word extraordinary twice in 4 sentences, which was twice more than she typically used it in a month. The magazine wanted the feature to run in 6 weeks. Clara sat on the ridge on the 11th day with her coffee going cold beside her and thought about 6 weeks from now, when these photographs would be in print. When people in New York and Chicago and Lowe's Angels would look at Colton Hale's face over their breakfast tables and feel something without knowing why. She thought about him seeing it. She thought about his daughter seeing it. She thought about the way he'd said funny, rationing the smile. Below her, the valley was doing its morning thing. The creek, the light, the grass. Everything she'd come here to photograph, sitting perfect and untouched and mostly ignored, because somewhere in the second week she'd stopped seeing the landscape without looking for the figure in it. This was the thing she had not planned for. She was a professional. She'd spent 12 years being a professional. She'd kept her personal life surgically separate from her work life because she'd seen what happened when photographers fell in love with their subjects. The work went soft. The photographer lost the eye. The distance that made great photography possible collapsed, and what replaced it was something warmer and less useful. She knew this. She drank her cold coffee. Colton's truck came up the ridge trail at 7:15, the way it had every morning she'd been out here. He got out, looked at the valley, looked at her, said good morning in the way he said it, like a fact rather than a greeting. Clara said good morning back. He sat down on the same flat rock he always sat on. She didn't photograph him. She just sat 5 feet away and watched the valley with him, and for 20 minutes they didn't speak, which had become its own kind of language between them. Then he said, "You're leaving in 10 days. Yes. Feature will run when? 6 weeks. He nodded. My daughter will think the barn one is funny. Clara looked at him. You've seen the barn one? You showed me the back of the camera after you took it. Right, she had. She did that sometimes, showed a subject a shot to build trust to prove she wasn't hiding anything. With him, she'd done it more than usual. He looked at the valley. "It's a good photograph." "It is," she agreed. "You're very good at what you do," he said. Clara said nothing. "That's not something I say easy," he added. She knew it wasn't. She raised the camera. She took one shot of the valley, just the valley, the landscape she'd come here for, the image her editor was expecting, the whole reason she'd gotten in that rental car 3 weeks ago and driven off a GPS map into a dirt road. She lowered the camera. "Colton," she said. He turned. "I need to tell you something before I leave because I'm not someone who does well with things left unsaid." He was very still. "This week has been the best work of my career," she said, "and I don't think that's entirely about the photographs." The valley below them was doing nothing special. The creek ran, the grass moved. The mountains sat blue and patient in the far distance, doing what mountains do, which is wait. Colton looked at her for a long time. "I've got a daughter in Billings," he said. "I've got 400 acres that need me every single day. I've got a life that's the opposite of wherever you go next." "I know," she said. "I'm saying that because I want you to know I've already thought it." Clara turned this over. "And," she said. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite the smile, the close relative of it. "And I'm going to be in Billings next Friday," he said. "With my daughter. She wants to see a movie. She's going to want someone along who doesn't think animated penguins are beneath them." Clara looked at him. "I don't think animated penguins are beneath anyone," she said. "Good," he said and stood up. He walked back to his truck. She raised the camera and took one more shot of the valley. And this time she was smiling. And the light was doing everything it had promised to do when she'd first followed this dirt road off the edge of the map. The movie was about penguins who were trying to migrate to a new ocean, and it was, objectively, delightful. Colton's daughter was named Lucy, and she was 9 years old and had her father's eyes and absolutely none of his economy with words. She talked from the parking lot to the theater doors and through the entire pre-movie wait, and then leaned over twice during the film to tell Clara plot predictions that turned out to be completely correct, delivered with the confidence of someone who had cracked the code. After the movie, Lucy decided she needed waffles. They sat in a booth in a diner that was nothing like Rosie's, all bright lights and laminated menus, and Lucy ordered waffles with strawberries and explained to Clara that she had recently decided she wanted to be a marine biologist or possibly an astronaut. She was keeping her options open. Clara said both were excellent options. Lucy looked at her father. "Dad said you take pictures." "I do," Clara said. "Of what?" "Landscapes, people, things that are worth looking at." Lucy considered this. "Did you take pictures of Dad?" "Yes." "Can I see them?" Clara looked at Colton. He shrugged, the smallest shrug, which she had learned meant yes, but I'm not going to say it out loud. She pulled out her phone and showed Lucy the barn photograph. Lucy stared at it for a solid 10 seconds. "That's Dad," she said. "That's your dad," Clara agreed. "He looks like a cowboy," Lucy said. "He is a cowboy," Colton said. Lucy handed the phone back to Clara and went back to her waffles, satisfied in the complete way of children who receive confirmation of something they already believed. Clara drove back to Dalton that night with the windows down, the highway empty, the stars doing their overcommitted thing again. She had 4 days left on the assignment. She had 87 portrait photographs of Colton Hale and 400 landscape images of his land. She had a feature story that her editor had already told the art director was the best thing the magazine had run in 3 years. She had a 9-year-old's approval, which, she was discovering, carried unexpected weight. The last 4 days on the ranch felt different, not slower. Just more honest, the way the last pages of a book feel when you've stopped reading quickly and started reading carefully, because you know the end is coming and you want to hold it right. She shot everything she'd been meaning to shoot. The before-dawn light on the east field. The repair work on the south fence that flooded every spring. The moment each evening when Colton stood on the porch and watched the sky the way his grandfather had probably watched it. The same sky, the same calculation of weather and tomorrow. On the last morning, she stood on the ridge at sunrise. He came up behind her the way he always did on foot now, Ford left in the barn, his coffee cup in his hand. He stood beside her and looked at the valley. "You have what you need," he said. "Yes," she said. "For the magazine?" She turned and looked at him. "For the magazine," she agreed, a beat. "And for me." He looked out at the valley, the creek, the long grass. The blue mountains in the distance that would be there when both of them were gone, patient and permanent, and not particularly interested in the small human business of standing on ridges deciding things. 6 weeks, he said. 6 weeks, she said. I'll see the barn photograph in 6 weeks. You'll see all of them. He turned and looked at her, and this time the almost smile wasn't almost. Lucy will want to cut out the barn one, he said. Put it on the refrigerator. Clara raised the camera one last time. Don't, he said. She lowered it. He took a step toward her, and the valley was behind him, and the light was doing exactly what it always did on this ridge at this hour. The same gold it had been doing the morning she first drove out here, following a GPS that had already given up, following the light instead, which had turned out to be better navigation anyway. Come back in the fall, he said. The aspen color runs all the way down to the creek. It's worth shooting. She could feel the distance between them like a last sentence waiting to be finished. The aspen color, she said. And other things, he said. He looked at her the way he looked at his land, like something he had already decided was real, already decided was his, already decided was worth the work of keeping. Clara Webb had come to Montana for landscapes. She had found something that didn't fit in a frame. She went back in the fall. She went back in the spring after that. 2 years later, there was a second camera bag hanging on a hook beside the barn door, and Lucy had 3 photographs cut out and stuck to the refrigerator, and the south field flooded as it always did and always would, and none of it was a problem. It was just the facts of a life. And Clara had learned, standing on that ridge the first morning with the light doing its particular thing and a stranger on a black horse moving through her frame, that the best facts are the ones you don't see coming. The ones that walk into your picture and stay,